Hello, folks, and thank you for tuning in to the Federalist Files. On today's show, the controversial Wall Street Journal article, National Teachers Union Use Political Power to Write COVID Policy, State Department Allowed BLM Activities at Work on the Job, Iran blocks inspectors from accessing their nuclear facility, and finally, voters support less government and less taxes in the latest Rasmussen poll.
No, I'm not convinced about that. I think that we should continue to investigate what went on in China until we find out, to the best of our ability, exactly what happened. Certainly, the people who've investigated say it likely was the emergence from an animal reservoir that then infected individuals, but it could have been something else, and we need to find that out. So, that's the reason why I said I'm perfectly in favor of any investigation that looks into the origin of the virus.
So, folks, as always, thank you for tuning in, and here it is. It all comes to a... Once again, the media lied. we find, once again, the media, along with Dr. Fauci, lied. Not surprising at this point. This is something that Trump, he called a long time ago. We have this Wall Street Journal piece that just came out. It's a bombshell opinion article, really. It's written by Michael Gordon, Warren Strobel, and Drew Hinshaw. I believe it's some sort of exclusive. They got some of the intelligence report, or not really. It was the DNI intelligence report in January, right before the Trump administration left. They decided to declassify some of the information as it pertains to the origins of the COVID-19 virus. Some roots coming from the Wuhan lab, and there is Fauci covering himself saying, yeah, well, I'm not really sure we should keep the investigation open. About a year ago, he said, that's impractical. My assumption and my determination is that it came from probably some sort of another strain from another bat. He was saying, and this was at this time when they were announcing that it came from some sort of wet market or from a bat. From within Wuhan, the only market and the only place where bats, if it were to come from a bat, was, I think, something like 1,000 miles away, where there were actual bats, in that area. So essentially, the story, anything that Trump says, the media works so hard to disprove him. This is why, really, this whole Trump derangement syndrome, this is why the media has lost their credibility over these last couple of years, is because if they actually were consistent and they agreed with Trump when he said things that were statistically correct or has hunches on stories, because he was privy to some intelligence that he was not to give out to the public, if they somewhat gave him the benefit of the doubt sometimes, then they would really they'd be able to keep some of their credibility or hold on to some of their credibility. But at this point, they just consistently go against whatever the president said. So even such things such as the First Step Act got it's either if Trump does something positive, it gets no coverage, or there's always a counter argument to whatever Trump does always. For example, when he was attempting to cut the payroll taxes to give Americans more money in their pocket during the COVID epidemic, or a quote-unquote, forced government epidemic where they shut down everybody's businesses, everybody was saying he was attempting to defund Social Security. Folks, the Social Security payroll tax that you pay is nowhere near how much it actually costs every single year. So a lot of this subsidy, it's subsidized by the federal income tax. So eliminating payroll taxes, eliminating the payroll tax for Social Security just means the government's getting less of your money. It should not affect Social Security whatsoever, because Social Security is already built into the federal income tax. We have Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. It takes up 2/3 of the budget every single year, usually. And payroll taxes are so minimal, they're not even close to 2/3 of the federal taxes that you pay. Your federal income tax is really being used to subsidize that system. It's a social safety net. It's pretty much a triangle scheme-like system, and that's why it's no longer effective and it's not working. So if you're a younger listener, if you're an older listener, it's a totally different story. You're probably going to end up seeing your Social Security in the near future. If you're one of my younger listeners, I would highly advise you to plan strategically and financially plan like it will never be there in your future, because that's the way I plan. That's the way fiscally I, invest in. This is not financial advice, but that's what I do personally. I invest like I have no Social Security in the future. And if we do see, what we'll see some sort of rectifying of that system. I don't know how effective it's going to be after that, the type of payouts that you're going to get. So like I said, I want to go over this Wall Street Journal article. Everything, as always, that I am referencing will be in the show notes. This is a long piece. I only took a couple of excerpts from it. So it starts off, the best part is that this is information that was released in January, and now suddenly the media decides to kind of circle around to it now. I mean, it's 4 or 5 months later. So it starts off, 3 researchers from China's Wuhan Institute of Virology became sick enough in November 2019 that they sought hospital care, according to a previously undisclosed U.S. intelligence report that could add weight to growing calls for a fuller probe of whether the COVID-19 virus may have escaped from the laboratory. The details of the reporting go beyond a State Department fact sheet issued during the final days of the Trump administration, which said that several researchers at the lab, a center for the study of coronaviruses and other pathogens, became sick in autumn of 2019 with symptoms consistent with both COVID-19 and common seasonal illness. So we're talking about November 2019. We had 3 researchers at the Wuhan Lab of Virology that all had COVID-like symptoms. And this was released in an intelligence report to the public in January of this year. So November 2019 is roughly when many epidemiologists and virologists believe that COVID-19, the virus behind the pandemic, first began circulating around the central Chinese city of Wuhan, where Beijing says that the first confirmed case was a man who fell ill on December 8th, 2019. So it's not that unreasonable for it to be November 2019. The Wuhan Institute hasn't shared raw information, safety logs, and lab records on its extensive work with coronaviruses in bats, which many consider the most likely source of the virus. So we've had the media this whole time saying that this was coming from bats that were, that aren't native of this land of Wuhan. Nearest one is, I think, something like 100 miles away, right? And then they also have these additional wet markets too. So this has been the claim from the media that we don't know where it came from. They were calling Trump racist. They called him all these different names because him stating that this was straight up incorrect. What they said is a lie. That is somehow racist on him. He called it the Wuhan virus. He called it the Chinese virus, and then they called him racist for that. So then he called it the Wuhan virus. They also called him racist for that. There's a history of calling viruses or different diseases from their origin location, such as Lyme's disease. I believe it's Lyme's, Connecticut, where that came from. There's other ones. Swine flu, that's different because it came from pigs. But, China just does whatever they want, really. China has repeatedly denied that the virus escaped from one of its labs. On Sunday, China's foreign ministry cited a WHO, the World Health Organization-led team's conclusion after a visit to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, or the WIV, in February that a lab leak was extremely unlikely. And the foreign ministry states, the U.S. continues to hype the lab leak theory. Is it actually concerned about tracing the source or trying to divert attention? End quote. So the Biden administration declined to comment on the intelligence, but said that all technically credible theories on the origin of the pandemic should be investigated by the WHO and international experts, which I find this very interesting. So the Biden administration doesn't care. They want to play up the pandemic. We've had the media. We've had CNN with the death ticker. I think it's over something like 600,000 people have passed away from COVID-19. You guys make such a big deal. This holds such a heavy weight on the American psyche. You call this a pandemic. You do all of these things. You shut down the economy. You cost millions of people their jobs and their livelihoods. A lot of people committed suicide. I believe suicide rates spiked something like 40% this year alone, the past year. So we have all these negative adverse effects from government overreach and government oversight, and the government, along with the mainstream media or the legacy media class, made this like it was such a big deal. It was an existential threat to our existence, costing millions of people their jobs, their lives. And there has been, they don't want to oversee, they don't want to look into it or investigate it. We're talking about setting up a committee to investigate January 6th, where not one person's life was lost except for Ashley Babbitt, in an actual, what they call an insurrection. An insurrection, once again, would be if an armed population showed up to that location and tried to take it over. We had a bunch of people that were taking selfies in the Capitol building, invited in by police officers. And they want a commission to investigate that, right? But they don't want, and they've been playing this. They're going to sit there on that January 6th commission. They're going to talk about January 6th now, folks, for the next 4 years. They're going to run on it in the midterms, and then they're going to run on it in the next election, especially if Donald Trump is the Republican trying to run in that presidential election. They will talk about this. This will be their version of a 9/11. They're going to talk about this forever. This will continue. That they want to investigate. And then they don't want to investigate anything having to do with this Wuhan virus. And it's been 600,000 people in America have passed from this, and they don't care. They want the WHO, the World Health Organization, which we give millions more dollars to than China does. They want them to investigate it, and other international experts. It is astonishing, folks. So now what I have a lot of different clips here. First off, I want to show you all Maggie Haberman of the New York Times, what her response is, and it's amazing the cover-up from the legacy corporate media class. There's zero accountability from them, and they continue to just project and continue to blame and talk about Trump nonsensically, as if they have some sort of sick obsession. Play 5.
I want to bring in CNN political analyst and Washington correspondent for the New York Times, Maggie Haberman. Maggie, so nice to see you this morning. This matters. Understanding where coronavirus and how the pandemic began matters. A lot of the discussion about the lab leak, I think, was clouded early on because there was the suggestion by some that it was somehow a Chinese weapon that caused this. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a lab accident. But we've come a long way from people dismissing this as a conspiracy theory to a lot of people taking this seriously, Maggie.
We have, John, and look, I do think it's important to remember that part of the issue when this was first being reported on and discussed back a few months after the pandemic had begun was that then President Trump and Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, both suggested they had seen evidence that this was formed in a lab, and they also suggested it was not released on purpose, but they refused to release the evidence showing what it was. And so because of that made this instantly political. I think that it was, example 1000 when the Trump administration learned that when you have burned your own credibility over and over again, people are not immediately going to believe you, especially in an election year. However, that does not mean it's not worth discussing. There has been a sort of persistent, albeit relatively quiet, focus on whether that was the origin of the virus, and it is compounded by the fact that there have not been clear answers from Chinese officials about it, and that investigators trying to find out the origin have been stymied. So I do think we're in a different period of this, John, but I also think it's important to remember because I think it's getting reframed in a way that's just not true to what happened. I don't mean here. I mean in this broader debate by Trump supporters about what happened when this was originally raised.
So the media's answer to their malfeasance and their negligence in doing their job is it's your fault. It is somehow the president's fault. Here's the thing, folks. These are investigative journalists. If this is information that cannot be leaked for national security reasons, it can't be leaked. But you guys are investigative journalists, investigative analysts, aren't you? So aren't you supposed to do your job and look into things and just saying, oh, well, it's not true because Trump said it because we hate Trump? They're projecting right now. They're saying, oh, this isn't the true story. Trump told us this, but he didn't say any. Yeah, he didn't tell you guys. Yeah, that's your job. You guys are to investigate and report. That is your job. So what do you want the White House to do your job for you every single day? If this is supposed to be something that has some sort of national security prevalence and it's not able to be said, why is it that you guys couldn't go forward and do your job and investigate something? So you're angry because you guys didn't do your job, months ago or even a full year ago, and now it comes to bite you in the ass, and now you're angry, and all you do is project, and then you turn around and say, well, Trump supporters are going to make their own. There's a lot of things going on where they're going to change the narrative on this. No, you guys, and what's even funnier is, it is such projection. She mentions, well, Trump's lied about so many things that he's killed his credibility, this, that. I'm like, no. You guys have lied about so many things that you have killed your own credibility. This is why no one listens to you anymore. If anybody even sees when you go on social media, I remember reading this Wall Street Journal piece. And if you read something that's fact-checked on it, most likely you just don't take the fact-check seriously. Because there's been so many lies. Because these fact-checks now are subjective. They're not fact-based most of the time. It is subjective what your opinion is. They'll fact-check people's opinions now at this point. So the media has lost all credibility. And this is really what their main problem is. And we have a media that, and I'll tell you right now, folks, we have, our epidemic in this country is not of the COVID. It is of communists. We have communism permeating throughout our society. Communism is in almost all of our institutions. In terms of college, higher education, we also have communism in journalism. We've never seen a implicit or a complicit media like we're seeing currently right now, where they only extol more government programs, less individual freedoms and individual rights, where every single late night comedy host, with the exception of Steven Crowder, goes on there and extols big government values, communistic like values. And using the word communist has that negative pejorative to it. People always said, why is it that, you shouldn't say communist, because that's not what they really are. And then when you actually look through what their ideology is and what they've been doing this entire time, is you realize they're communists. They're so anti-American. They're antithetical to our existence, these people. They hate America in all aspects. That's why over this past week or so, we've seen so much attacking of Israel, because Israel represents much more of a right-leaning country, a much more of a conservative, independent freedoms and rights. They represent little America, and that's why the media and the Democrat Party is so quick to condemn Israel. So we had the media. They dropped the story. They did a terrible job, and they blame you in response, and they blame the administration in response, and they project. And they say, well, Trump lost all credibility. No, you guys have lost all credibility. Him calling you guys the fake news media, that originally was a left-wing thing, and then Trump adopted it and threw it right back at them. And guess why it worked, folks? Because there was credibility to the claim of them being the fake news media. They've been carrying the water of the Democrat Party now for, a little bit more than 20 years. They've been doing it for a very long time. And Trump's and Rush Limbaugh was really almost like the single soldier of freedom. He stood on the front lines and he fought these guys relentlessly for 30, 40 years. And now we need to step up in his remembrance at this point. We need to step up and we need to do the same. We need to fight these guys vigilantly until our deaths, because we're not going to sit here and live in some sort of communist, totalitarian, authoritarian society. I'm not dealing with that. I'm not doing it. And I'm sure a lot of you folks at home, you don't feel the same way. You do not want to live under some sort of dictator-like rule where you work for the government. You work, and then all your money just goes straight to the government, and then it's redistributed amongst the population of people that don't want to work. So next what I have, Donald Trump. It's him saying that it came from China, it came from Wuhan specifically, and he trashes the W.H.O. This is about a year ago. Play 6.
Have you seen anything at this point that gives you a high degree of confidence that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was the origin of this virus?
Yes, I have. And I think that the World Health Organization should be ashamed of themselves, because they're like the public relations agency for China. And this country pays them almost $500 million a year, and China pays them $38 million a year. And whether it's a lot or more, it doesn't matter. It's still, they shouldn't be making excuses when people make horrible mistakes, especially mistakes that are causing hundreds of thousands of people around the world to die. I think the World Health Organization should be ashamed of themselves.
So the WHO, who has been wish-washy on COVID this entire time, has defended the Chi-Coms, the Chinese Communist Party, during this entire process. Joe Biden, the Biden administration, that's who they want to cover it. They do not want their own individual investigation. They want the pony boys of the Chinese Communist Party to investigate some crimes that are almost international. I mean, we had countries shut down their entire system, just like ours, shut down their entire system. You have people getting accosted on the streets by police in some of these more authoritarian countries. They're getting arrested for just practicing the freedom of going to church. And we give $500 million to this organization, which Trump actually cut the funds. I think they reinstated the funds with the new administration through some sort of executive order. We give $500 million, and they give $38 million, the Chinese Communist Party. It is amazing how these bureaucracies, it seems like they all always fall on the side of the Chinese Communist Party or the socialist regime that's in power in this country or in other countries. The bureaucracy only breeds communists. By having a big bureaucratic government, it only breeds these socialist, communist, authoritarian, redistributionist style systems. They're not going to breed people that believe in individual rights and individual freedoms, because guess what then, folks? That is antithetical to the existence of the bureaucracy in which they work in. So why hasn't Biden pushed for this investigation individually for the United States? I have Peter Doocy asking Jen Psaki that question. It's a long clip, but I think it's necessary to kind of understand and grasp the full aspect of what the Biden administration believes, how they believe in some sort of weird globalism and letting foreign entities handle things that the United States should handle themselves and take accountability for themselves. Play clip 8.
Officials. So why isn't President Biden pushing for more access, more information to get to the bottom of exactly what happened?
We are. And we have repeatedly called for the WHO to support an expert-driven evaluation of the pandemic's origins that is free from interference or politicization.
But with 589,920 dead Americans, at what point does President Biden say, we don't want to wait for the WHO. We don't know what they're doing. This needs to be an American-led effort to get to the bottom of what happened?
Well, first of all, we need access to the underlying data and information in order to have that investigation.
And why not? But he talks all the time about how he's known President Xi for a long time. So why can't he just call
and we need them
him for that information?
I think you're misunderstanding how this process actually works. An international investigation led by the World Health Organization is something that we've actually been pressing for several months in coordination with a range of partners around the world. We need that data. We need that information from the Chinese government. What we can't do, and what I would caution anyone doing, is leaping ahead of an actual international process.
So is there any amount of casualties from COVID in this country that would make you want to not wait for an international effort and just do it as...
Well, I have to say, I think the family members of the loved ones whose lives have been lost and deserve accurate information, data, not the jumping to a conclusion without having the information necessary to conclude what the origins are. What we do share, everyone in this country, is a desire to know how this started, where it started, and prevent it from ever happening again.
This is amazing. So the Biden administration, they want to call for an investigation from the WHO, the people that have been carrying the water of the Chinese Communist Party this entire time. They don't want any type of independent investigation from the United States of America. And you notice the positioning at the very end where she essentially dodges the question and she changes the subject to the families of the people that have passed away from COVID-19 instead. It really is just astonishing, the positioning of the Biden administration and how the media just doesn't, they're just not consistent. They're not really reporting any of this information. It's difficult. I'm sure it's very difficult to report what's actually going on in the news when you care so much and you lick the boot so much of the Democrat Party. I don't know how you even report news at this point because they're doing a terrible job in governance, and that's why their main focus right now is this January 6th commission, and their main focus is only to criticize the Republicans all of the time. So I have this next article from the New York Post. Teachers union influenced the CDC on school reopenings. emails start to show here. So the end-all be-all, the CDC, the people that we trust the most for their guidance, government made policies based off of CDC, guidance. So this article is written by John Levine. The New York Post has actually gotten these emails now between the teachers union, the biggest teacher union in the United States, the American Federation of Teachers, and some of the CDC bureaucrats that work there, whether they have found these emails through some sort of, I think it was a Freedom of Information Act. So the American Federation of Teachers lobbied the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on and even suggested language for the federal agency's school reopening guidance released in February. The powerful teachers' unions' full court press preceded the federal agency, putting the brakes on a full reopening of in-person classrooms. Emails between top CDC, AFT, and White House officials show. The emails were obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request by the conservative watchdog group Americans for Public Trust and provided to the New York Post. So let me just try to emphasize this here. You have this powerful teachers union. I think the American Federation of Teachers is one of the biggest teachers unions in the United States. They had a sit-in, and they've had emails, and they've had these in person. It says they've had these emails between top CDC officials in the White House telling them, adding to language, suggesting language in the CDC guidance for school reopening. So we have now people that are not, you're going to talk about the CDC, oh, they have scientists, and they're the ones that make the guidance, and they're scientific, and we should believe the science, as the left wing says. So we have a bunch of people that work as union members, which means these people aren't even teachers, they're union members. They work in a union. They don't even specialize in teaching. Maybe they did at one time in their lives, and now they're union hack, boot-licking losers. Now they work in the union. Pathetic. Public sector unions are absolutely pathetic, folks. You have people that negotiate contracts for taxpayers. So the taxpayer is not even represented, and the person negotiating the contract is the person that's already elected by the union, because the teacher union shill out for the Democrat Party, and then they get these Democrat representatives voted in, and then they work out their little side deals, so these teachers unions become more and more powerful and more wealthy. It is really just astonishing how this is unconstitutional. Across the board, it's unconstitutional to have taxpayer dollars going to an organization that's union-led in the negotiating process. The citizen really just is not represented at all, because the person that is elected by the union is the person negotiating the public sector contract on taxpayer dollars. It is just amazing to me. So they're the ones now writing policy. We have teachers union officials writing the public safety policy, health policy, the CDC guidance for reopening in schools. It is amazing. So the documents show a flurry of activity between CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky, her top advisors, and union officials. So these people are all involved, emailing each other back and forth. So with Biden brass being looped in at the White House in the days before the highly anticipated February 12th announcement of school reopening guidelines. So this is an actual email. The American Federation of Teachers Senior Director for Health Issues, Kelly Trattner, in a February 1st email. This is what she's stating. This is her stating this, describing the union as the CDC's thought partner. So this is what she states, and I quote in the email from her going to the CDC. Thank you again for Friday's rich discussion about forthcoming CDC guidance and for your openness to the suggestions made by our President Randy Weingarten and the American Federation of Teachers. So, they're having discussions back and forth about the CDC guidance and your openness in our suggestions that we're telling you to make to your CDC guidance. So to go on, Trattner continues, and this is Trattner once again, the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers. She is emailing. She's emailing out to the CDC. So she states next, We were able to review a copy of the draft guidance document over the weekend and were able to provide some initial feedback to several staff this morning about possible ways to strengthen the document. We believe our experiences on the ground can inform and enrich thinking around what is practicable and prudent in future guidance documents, end quote. So now she's telling them, what should you, this is what you should be putting in the document. This is our feedback and possible ways of strengthening the document. So the lobbying ended up paying off in this case. In at least 2 instances, language that is considered by them suggestions directly in the email were copy and pasted and nearly verbatim into the final text of the CDC document. With the CDC preparing to write that schools could provide in-person instructions regardless of community spread of the virus, Troutner argued for the inclusion of a line reading this, and I quote, "In the event of high community transmission resulting from a new variant of COVID-19, a new update of these guidelines may be necessary," end quote. That language appeared on page 22 of the final CDC guidance. Now, the American Federation of Teachers also demanded special remote work concessions for teachers. And this is the way they stated it. And I quote, "who have documented high-risk conditions or who are at increased risk for COVID-19, end quote. And that similar arrangements should extend to, and I quote, "staff who have a household member," and I end quote, "with similar risks." A lengthy provision for that made it into the text of the final guidance. There's no specifics on these statements. They're very broad in nature. They come out with these broad statements that can be interpreted in many different ways, and the reason for that is to have more wiggle room to get these teachers out of going to work. That's the reason for all of this. That's why they needed that extra provision written in saying, oh, if there's some sort of new variant for COVID-19, then we should change all of it. We should update these guidelines and pretty much send all the kids home again and make all these teachers once again teach from home because they're all lazy and they don't want to go to work. I have family members that work as teachers, and they're part of, because you almost have to be part of the union. And they say that teachers are the laziest people that they have ever worked with. They're people that have worked in the trucking industry. They've worked in the food service industry, in kitchens. They've worked many very rough, tough, physical labor-like jobs that required a lot of work, physical work, whether it's hours or it's just physical labor. And they said by far, easily, takes the cake unequivocally, the laziest people they have ever worked with are teachers. They complain the most. They're the most complacent workforce that we have. And I'm sure there's a lot of anomalies out there. I'm sure there's people that love their job. They like to work hard. But they said the teachers union, the people that they sit there and complain about having to go to school, there's been the reason that this is... You notice how everybody else has had to work this entire time? Everyone else had to work. You had people that worked at McDonald's, stocked the shelves over at, the nearby ShopRite or the near shopping center. They all had to do their jobs, right? People in the service industry, you saw UPS drivers, FedEx drivers, guess who? They were still driving around, right? They were still doing their jobs. Why is that everybody else has to do their job, but the teachers union can take off an entire year and a half from work, and that's okay? So, 1619 Project, Force-Fed in Schools. Got this town hall piece written by Humberto Fontava. So we have now, the Biden administration is looking to push policy to teach the 1619 Project in school. So this is what cultural Marxism is. Right here, it is blatant, it is obvious. So Fox News reports, and I quote, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and fellow Republicans are demanding President Biden's Education Department block a planned history education proposal that invokes the 1619 Project. McConnell and dozens of other GOP colleagues wrote in a letter to the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardano, and I quote, Americans do not need or want their tax dollars diverted from promoting the principles that unite our nation toward promoting radical ideologies meant to divide us. So I'm going to go into just a little bit of what critical race theory is all about, because that's really what this 1619 Project, what it stems from. And I've actually not fully read into it, but when I read a little bit of this article, I was very, very troubled with some of the origins of critical race theory. It really, what it is it's Marxist. It is nothing more, nothing less than Marxist ideology that is looking to brainwash your children and also anti-American, make them hate the country, have no love of country. So these radical ideas, like those from Professor Ibram Kendi, the big kahuna of critical race theory, somebody that has extolled it for a very long time, which Biden's education department wants to force feed our school children. This is actually from the big kahuna Ibram Kendi, and this is from the playbook of critical race theory. And tell me that this doesn't sound anything like a, Marxism to you. It states, and I quote, "In order to truly be anti-racist, you also have to truly be anti-capitalist. The origins of racism cannot be separated from the origins of capitalism. The origins of capitalism cannot be separated from the origins of racism." End quote. So just to begin with, historically, if you actually think about all of the nations, we were the quickest country to abolish something that was considered the rule, not the exception, years ago, slavery. That's the first thing, right? At the inception of it took a very short period of time for us to abolish and eradicate that. And there was an attempt to eradicate it at the very inception of our writing of our Constitution by a lot of our founders at that time. Capitalism has only extolled and has bettered the lives of more people ever in the history. Capitalism, which has really only truly been tried in America, in its fullest sense, has only truly been, achieved in America. What we have now isn't, ideal 100%, but if you look around at who has the most capitalist-like society, it has truly been achieved more over here than any other country. And this has lifted people out of poverty, more people ever than socialism, than communism ever has. And that has nothing to do with whether it's race. It's not race based whether or not you're lifted out of poverty. So, it's not like in America, if you're black, you can't be rich, or if you're Hispanic, you can't be a millionaire. That's not how it works. It is a merit-based system. To the best of its ability, merit-based more than any other country in the entire world. It's not a perfect system. No system is perfect because guess what? It's made by man. Therefore, it has to inherently be flawed like man is. So as for Nicole Hannah-Jones, author of the New York Times 1619 Project, she believes, and I'm quoting, "What Mitch McConnell and others like him want is for our children to get a propagandistic, nationalistic understanding of history that is not about facts." It's amazing. So they hate the idea of nationalism as in a patriotism towards your country. They don't want that to happen. They want people to hate their country. And it is so blatantly obvious now that this is cultural Marxism, that the left wing has gone off the deep end, and they are Marxists. They hate America. Just remember, we have these people that have been extolling. They have been extolling Palestine, right? If you do not remember, folks, after 9/11, cut back to a clip, look up 9/11, Palestine after 9/11. They were cheering in the streets in elation. In America, we would never do something like that if 3,000 civilians in another country were killed by a foreign terrorist group. But in Palestine, they loved it. They loved just regular citizens in Palestine. They loved it. They hate Americans. The Hamas hates Americans. Okay, but those people are the ones that are extolled by the now rabid left wing in this country. Now we also have these anti-Americans, and these are the same people that defend criminals. George Floyd, criminal. Should he have died? No. But he is now a deity to the left. Him, Jacob Blake, also criminal. We have two people that are criminals, and they're so vehemently defended by our media class and the left wing in our country. So these people are deeply anti-American. They want the civilian, the regular working class person like you, to be helpless to the government. They don't want you to have firearms. They don't want you to have your freedom of speech. They want to take their message and cram it straight down your throat, and they want you to have no way to answer and fight back against them. So it goes on next. and this is Nicole Hannah-Jones. Now she's talking about Stalinist Cuba, and this is amazing. And he goes on to actually, in this piece, Humberto Fontava from Town Hall, he goes on in this piece to disprove her theories by talking about the education system in Cuba. But she goes on to talk about the education system in Cuba. She stated, and I quote, "Education is the cornerstone of the Cuban Revolution. Nearly everywhere among the magnificent Havana architecture signs speak of equality and liberation through education." So he goes on to really go. He states, so the people of Cuba, was their literacy rates before the Cuban Revolution, before Castro and his communist regime took over. And these are the rates when Castro goes, we're going to push this huge spending program, and we're going to propagate this to try to increase the literacy rates in this country. Guess what happened, folks? It all fell. The literacy rates dropped substantially because he had his communist-like government scheme set up, and anything the government tries to do, they fail at. And every single, especially in a socialist communist system like that, and I use those two words as if they're tantamount to each other interchangeably, because that's really what it is. Socialism turns into full-on communism. Socialism really is communism. So then he goes on, he talks about Vladimir Lenin, also devout communist. He was right before Stalin. If some of you are familiar with World War II, there's Leningrad in Russia, which is named, and that was a huge battle between the Russians and the Germans during World War II, that was named after Vladimir Lenin. So he states, and this is a quote straight from him, "Give me 4 years to teach the children, and the seed I have sown will never be uprooted," end quote. So it really is. When you look at what is propagated and promulgated by the left wing in this country, and you also think historically what the communists, the Russian communists openly admit, the Communist Manifesto, the Karl Marx booklet, really the playbook to communism, instilling it in the country. There is total consistencies right there with what our left wing is doing, especially the anti-Americanism. And I was listening to a podcast Ben Shapiro had on, I can't remember the name of this writer, I'm drawing a blank. Something Horowitz. Daniel Horowitz, maybe? He's an older man, probably in his 90s if I had to guess. He was a communist his entire life. His parents actually, raised him as a communist. And when the Black Panther Party rolled around, he raised tons of money for the Black Panther Party. Black Panther Party went on to kill his one of his very good friends. And when he said to his other friends that were also part of the Communist Party, he said, Black Panther Party, I think they killed her. And his friend said, well, blame that on that's because of white racism. So really there's just, cultural Marxism shows blame is spread out amongst everybody in the society. It is the fault of the white racist that the Black Panther goes and kills a innocent white person. And that's really, in this case, with the communists and the left wing, the AOCs of the world, the Rashida Tlaibs, the blame is on Israel for Hamas shooting and firing rockets at them, and then, in result, their civilians getting killed in the crossfire. That is somehow the fault of Israel, because Israel's the oppressor. In communism, in Marxism, there's always an oppressor. It always comes from somebody that's in power. There's always an oppressor, and then there's always a victim. That's how it always works. Because by doing that, you are able to unify behind one origin, behind one point of view, that there's an oppressor and then there's a victim, or I guess somebody that's being suppressed. And that's really what the left extols. This is what they've been doing now for years, and now it's becoming much more evident in our politics. They are Marxists. So next, this New York City principal sends in emails telling her staff to support Palestine and Palestinians. Breitbart news piece. So in an email sent amid the since-suspended fighting between Israel and Hamas terrorists, Principal Amanda Bueno told staffers at MS 136, and I quote, "If you have been watching the news in absolute horror, you are not alone. You can take action today by protesting, attending a vigil, making a public commitment to Palestinian liberation, signing a petition, or calling your government officials to place sanctions on Israel. The time is now to take a stand for those impacted by state-sanctioned violence and crimes against the humanity of the most vulnerable in our world. So we're talking, I mean, how much more can these teacher unions, these leftists, how much more obvious can it be until we actually call them what they really are? I mean, everybody freaks out when you use the word communist, but that's what they are. I mean, that's really outright. That's what they are, the communists. It's obvious here. She comes out, principal emails everybody telling them to get super political at their own jobs, which is just unprofessional for the work setting. I don't know if she even got really suspended for this. It's amazing. So what I have next is Professor Joanna Olson Kennedy, and I believe she's a doctor. She's gone through multiple, gender reassignment surgeries herself. She's performed multiple, and this is her talking about children. So we're talking about adolescents. We're not talking about adults. We're talking about adolescents deciding to go through what they would call a gender reassignment or a gender affirmation surgery. Play 9.
Actually, people make life-altering decisions in adolescence. All the time. All the time. And honestly, most of them are good. It's just the bad ones that we talk about. Oh my God, the cinnamon challenge, right? I mean, why do we know about it? Because it's a thing, and it's not common. Like, most teenagers aren't eating cinnamon, right? But some are, and they're on YouTube, and that's stupid. But we don't put on YouTube the things that are really good decisions, right? Oh my gosh, my kid took the SATs. Not a very exciting after-school special, right? But so what we do know is that adolescents actually have the capacity to make a reasoned, logical decision. And here's the other thing about chest surgery. If you want breasts at a later point in your life, you can go and get them.
I apologize to making you all go through that. So, Joanna Olson Kennedy, MD. She is an adolescent medicine physician specializing in the clinical care of gender nonconforming children and transgender youth, board certified in pediatrics and adolescents medicine. So that should be that should make you feel pretty good that she's board certified. She's an associate professor of clinical pediatrics at the USC Keck School of Medicine. She is the medical director of the Center for Trans Youth Health and Development at Children's Hospitals in Los Angeles, the largest transgender youth clinic in the United States, and has been providing medical intervention for transgender youth and youth adults, including puberty suppression and cross-sex hormones, for the past 15 years. Dr. Olson Kennedy has also been brought upon us by the devil, and no, that doesn't say it. So this woman she's off her rocker. I like how she mentions adolescents have to make decisions all the time, so that is a justification. Yeah, no shit. Adolescents have to make decisions all the time. Do we want them to make more and more decisions, and do we want them to have make more consequential decisions? Is more importantly the answer. And her comparing this to taking the SAT, it's just a terrible argument, full of fallacies. First off, taking the SAT, after you take the SAT, there's no permanent damage that's been done to your body after taking the SAT. That's the first thing. Second thing is, most of these kids that take the SAT, the reason you take the SAT a lot of the time is because your parents are nagging you on it, unless if you're very, as a younger kid in high school, you really care about you're so career oriented that you're so adamant on taking the SAT. Most of these people take the SAT because their parents tell them to do so. So this isn't a decision that kids usually make willfully. And at the very end, it's almost like she views children, and we're talking children here, we're not talking about adults, adolescents' bodies like they're a Mr. Potato Head. Like you could just take things off and just put new things on if you feel like it. That's not how it works. There's irreparable damage that is done to children in this case that can never be, turned back. When you are a man or a woman, and guess what? That goes straight down to your DNA, straight down to your chromosomal structure, your bone structure. You could say you changed someone's gender, or there was a gender reaffirmation surgery, but guess what? At the end of the day, you still don't function as that sex. Therefore, you aren't that sex. You're just not. You may think you are, and you may want to force people through the whims of the government boot to call you a woman, even if you are a man. But the truth is you're a man, and you went through this surgery, and a lot of times there's this regret where people actually regret getting the surgery, especially when they're at those young adolescent ages. And for her answer, it's if you lop them off, don't worry, you can just get a surgery. Like you're somehow like Mr. Potato Head. Like there's no sanctity or dignity in your own autonomous body itself. Like no one cares about that. It doesn't matter. It really is, man. The left is just total. The left wing has just lost it. They've gone so far off the deep end. You have tons of Democrats people that used to be Democrats that have now switched over to the Republican Party just because they have lost the nonsensical approach from the left wing, the impracticality of what the left wing extols every single day, the virtues. So get to a different topic. Iran blocks inspectors' access to nuclear sites. This is a Zero Hedge piece. Tyler Durden is the author here. So we have the Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Kalibath on Sunday announced that the IAEA inspectors will no longer have access to surveillance images of the country's nuclear sites. So when I say the IAEA, that is some sort of international organization set up by the UN to check in on Iran and their development of nuclear weapons, nuclear bombs. So from May 22nd and with the end of the 3-month agreement, the agency will have no access to data collected by cameras inside the nuclear facilities agreed under the agreement, he said. So they're pretty much pulling the rug on the UN here. They're saying America better come to the table and they better negotiate some sort of Iran nuclear deal with us because we don't care anymore. We're not allowing you into our facilities to inspect what's going on, which means we could be making nuclear weapons. We don't really care at this point. So underscoring how significant a threat to the West and its allies ending all site monitoring procedures would be, Israel has previously said this would be a red line showing the Islamic Republic's intent to pursue nuclear weapons. All of this, in reality, appears Tehran's attempts to move more speedily towards realizing a restoration of the Iran nuclear deal, which would include a major rollback of all sanctions, also seen as vital prior to Iran's new presidential election in June. So now we have Iran. They know that we have a weak administration in here right now. So what they're going to do is their answer is they're going to fight no fire with fire. They've already had the Biden administration capitulate to them, and they're going to continue to take more and more powers and see and like a school bully, really. Give me your lunch money today, then tomorrow it's give me your shoes, and then the next day it's give me your shirt, give me this, give me that. They're just going to continue to take more and more from America because they know the current administration that's in place is not going to do anything about it. So, leaked State Department memo. Oh, this one's great. So the State Department had a memo out during BLM protests. It leaked. This is a human events piece. It's written by Jack Posobiec. I highly advise you all to follow him on Twitter. He has some of the greatest content. He always has the inside scoop of what's going on in Washington. I have no idea how. He must have his own intelligence. Somebody. He has his own connections in there. So, as outlined by 2020 guidance from the U.S. Office of Special Counsel, the Hatch Act generally allows employees to engage in BLM-related activity while on duty or in the workplace. But as described below, employees are still prohibited from combining BLM-related activity with political activity while on duty or in the workplace, and from engaging in partisan political fundraising in connection with BLM-related organizations. Political activity is an activity directed toward the success or failure of a political party, candidate, or for partisan political office or partisan political group. Okay. So what the State Department here now, they're justifying BLM-related activity on the job, on the clock, saying that it does not violate Hatch Act because it's not political. BLM has propagated themselves as a Marxist organization. Therefore, the American Marxist Party, the American Communist Party, they are associated and affiliated with a political party. That's the first thing. This is a violation of the Hatch Act. To begin with, this is a violation. They can say whatever they want. It's a violation of the Hatch Act. If you want to sit there and push Hatch Act violations to begin with, political, I don't know what kind of activity related, BLM related activity while on the job. If you want to sit there and talk about politics, me personally, I think the Hatch Act in a lot of regards is unconstitutional because it violates the First Amendment. It's different if on the job you're going and you're protesting and you're holding a sign. That's a totally different story. If you're just shooting the shit with the person that works right next to you and you're talking about politics, that shouldn't be a problem. That shouldn't be any type of violation of anything. So next, post, and this was a very long piece, so I kind of cut it down a little bit. I just took a couple excerpts from how ridiculous this is. They were telling the State Department in this memo how to set up the flag positioning and to make sure that the BLM flag that they put up at the State Department headquarters, at these different headquarters of the State Department, they were going to be putting up BLM flags, which identify as a Marxist organization. So we have communist organizations. We are putting their flags under the U.S. flag on the flagpole. And I think it was hilarious how they had to delineate that it goes below the American flag. Every single flag, folks, goes below the American flag. Those are just the rules. The American flag is above all of those other flags. Okay? So next goes on. Posts are strongly encouraged to make full use of department and interagency tools and resources to promote policy objectives to advance racial equity and support for underserved communities throughout the year, including with a particular focus on May 25th and during June to commemorate Juneteenth and lesser-known racially motivated attacks such as the Tulsa Race Massacre, the 100th anniversary of which will take place May 31st to June 1st, 2021. On May 24th, the GPA will release a compilation video featuring messages from activists around the world on the importance of global racial justice as part of a playbook with language for the anniversary of George Floyd's murder. This video compilation will also feature senior department leaders to demonstrate the administration's commitment to racial equity and support for underserved communities. So we used to have a system set up, even in the school system when I was a kid, which was, 20-something years ago. It was set up where politics wasn't part of the workplace. You just didn't talk politics in the workplace. You could talk personal life, you could do whatever, and that's it. And I'm very sympathetic to that. Now we're telling people to extol certain specific political groups in the workplace, and our own federal government is talking about putting a flag up of a Marxist terrorist organization under the United States flag in our own State Department, meaning outside of our embassies. Our State Department has to do with foreign relations. Outside of our embassies, we're going to be flying this Marxist organization, terrorist organization flag. It is astonishing. I'm running out of words to illustrate what's going on right now in this country. Now, BLM support has plummeted since the summer. This is a Gateway Pundit piece. It's written by Cassandra Fairbanks. As you can see by this chart here, what we see first is June 1st, Trump threatens to deploy the military to quell protests, and then June 3rd was the peak of the support of BLM. Protests have spread to over 140 cities nationwide. This is based on a Civics, which is a polling company. You saw an increase 20% percentile points of support for BLM. Now, after it looks like the numbers are the same as they were before. And the reason for this having to be, the BLM, the organization, tore the country to the ground. They tore everything down. And then also you had the left wing promulgate the myths of BLM as well, which increased people's support of the organization. But we've seen, white Americans, there's tons of charts in this study. White Americans were very sympathetic in the beginning, and now at this point it's the same, if not a little bit less, support for BLM. Same thing with the Hispanic Americans. Actually, it dropped to a negative number, I believe. And then Republicans, it did it also. The percentile points that it dropped is almost 20%. Their support for BLM, the BLM movement. The only people, even all voters in a general sense, so independents as well, it's dropped. But Democrats, it's generally stayed the same. It's dropped maybe 1 percentile point, which wasn't really a big difference. But this is the problem. We don't have people supporting what the mainstream Democrat Party activist losers, as well as the hack job media class, what they're calling for, regular working class Americans, they do not support this. So now to get to some, I think I got one more here, or I got two more. I got another one from the Epic Times. And you know what? Actually, I'll cover this. You know what? Yeah, I'll cover this now, and then I'm going to cover my other thing. So most voters want smaller government and lower taxes. This is an Epic Times piece. It's written by Tom Ozemic. It was a Rasmussen poll released May 21st. Members of a representative sample of 1,000 U.S. likely voters were asked to weigh in on whether they favor a more active government with more services and higher taxes, or a smaller government with fewer services and lower taxes. So 55% said they'd rather have a smaller government, fewer services, and lower taxes, compared to the 37% who favored bigger government with more services at the cost of a higher tax bill. There were sharp partisan differences among respondents. 78% of Republicans were opposed to bigger government and more taxes, while 57% of Democrats held the opposite view. At the same time, the survey showed that 68% of respondents said they don't believe the government spends the money it collects from taxpayers wisely or carefully. So there's definitely an agreement that everybody thinks that it's not spent wisely or correctly. The right wing thinks that you guys are taking too much from us, so no matter what, it's not spent wisely or correctly because you're already taking our money. The left wing, what they believe is they want the government to spend money on their health care, their child care, education, college education, everything. But even, to a point, buy them cars, same thing, buy them housing as well. The left wing, the socialists in the left wing, which is now the mainstream left wing of America, they believe the government should be paying everything for them. They shouldn't have to work for anything. And only, if you notice, and this is why I call them the mainstream, they are the loudest ones in the party. So 37% of Democrats like the idea of bigger government, more services. That somehow is the loudest part of the party. That is the more mainstream part of the Democrat Party. Then you have a bunch of blue dog Democrats that really, at the end of the day, folks, if they sat there and really read about what the left wing extols, they would change over to Republican. If there was better messaging from the right wing, there would be no problem in getting a lot of those people in the Democrat Party, those old school 80s, 90s Democrats, over to the Republican side. I just think it's very interesting that there's such a vast difference where even Democrats are getting to the point where only 57% of them actually want more taxes and more government services. Only 57% of them want that. Or I'm sorry, compared to the 37% who want more services. No, yeah, only 57% of them actually want that. Which, yeah, that's the mainstream. So the 55% is all Americans, and then the 37% is the, I guess you would call it more like 1/3 of the socialists that live in America. But yeah, majority of the Democrats, they want higher taxes, more services. So to end, I have this one article, and then I have a couple quick headlines. I know we're running a little bit long today. That first segment took me a little longer than I thought it would. So I have this, Goldman Sachs now is calling Bitcoin a new asset class, which I thought was very interesting. And then, you know what, an article today just came out too. Goldman Sachs, they had this memo that got leaked where they're calling their estimation is, they're saying Ethereum is going to reach 18,000 by the end of the year. So right now it's around 2,500. Before the crash last week, it was around 4,000. They're saying that this thing could get up to 18K by the end of the year, which would be crazy numbers. It would be bonkers. That would mean some mainstream adoption of cryptocurrencies. But this is written by Brian Sozzi. It's a Yahoo Finance piece. It's time to take Bitcoin way more seriously as an investable asset, says Goldman Sachs. And this is what they stated in a Matthew McDermott, Goldman Sachs Global Head of Digital Assets. He stated this in a new piece of his research. Bitcoin is now considered an investable asset. It has its own idiosyncratic risk, partly because it's still relatively new and going through an adoption phase. And it doesn't behave as one would intuitively expect relative to other assets, given the analogy to digital gold to date. It's tended to be more aligned with risk-on assets, but clients and beyond are largely treating it as a new asset class, which is notable. It's not often that we get to witness the emergence of a new asset class. So yeah, usually, historically, Goldman Sachs, they've been around for, I think, hundreds of years at this point. I believe they started, I want to say, in the 1800s. Goldman Sachs. Maybe I should look that up. But I know they've been around for a very long time, and they're one of the few that have been around for that long. And the reason for it is they've always found a way to adapt with and assimilate to the environment that they've been put in. Financial environments change constantly. It's capricious. So they've been around since 1869. They've been around for 152 years. So I don't even know if any other organization, financial firm, I guess you would call them, or asset management, brokerage firm has been around for that long. But they're now stating that Bitcoin is even becoming its own asset class. Bitcoin is the one that probably gets the most clout amongst all the cryptocurrencies. So if you're somebody that invests, and this is not financial advice, but people that invest, some of them like to go 10%, 5 to 10% of their portfolio in Bitcoin, and a lot of people now are actually releasing whatever they hold in gold, and they're taking up Bitcoin instead as a hold of value. Which actually, if you think about, if you want to, invest in gold, right? So you either have the gold, you got to pay for the storage of the gold because there's some sort of security to that, or you have to pay to get it shipped out to you and hold it yourself. But whereas with Bitcoin, as long as the internet and the nodes are still running, you have it and you don't really have to pay anything to own it. Unlike gold, where you actually over the years, your interest in gold can go down because of you paying for people to guard the gold. So what I have a couple quick headlines, like I said before. I have Biden's border crisis, Fox News piece. So since February, 61,312 migrants have been released into the interior with either a notice to appear or an I-385, which fast-tracks migrants out of custody with a notice to report to an immigration customs enforcement office. I've mentioned this before. So just to give you kind of a comparison of the numbers, so we have 61,000 since February during the Biden administration. So just 47 migrants were released between October and the end of December when Trump was the president. Now in January, 1,317 migrants were released, which is a much lower number than what Biden right now is averaging. Then in February, when Biden administration took over, 8,797 in February, and then skyrocketing to 26,282 in March and 26,233 in April. So there is a crisis on the border. The media is not reporting it. They don't want anyone to know about it. But right now, like I said, they're going to sit there and they're going to try to change the narrative to the January 6th Commission and how Republicans are racist. So DeSantis, he signs a bill to keep big tech in check. This is the post-millennial. There's a lot of libertarians that are against this because it's anti-business, free market, what have you. We have Facebook, we have Amazon, we have Twitter, all going against small businesses themselves, really violating antitrust law because they have a monopoly on the businesses such as Amazon Web Services. So at this point, really, they've already muddied the waters up, and the Democrat Party doesn't really care about it. So is this justified? Is this not justified? The libertarians say it's not justified, but then the libertarians are silent on antitrust laws. That's really what their problem is. They're totally inconsistent. They don't say what their answer is, well, that's wrong, but somehow what Amazon did before that isn't wrong. So what DeSantis has done is he's made it so if you suspend somebody that is running for political office or is in a position of political office, you will have to pay a $250,000 fine per day for the crime of deplatforming candidates for elected office. Fines of $25,000 would be faced for lower level offenses. So the Florida House voted 77 to 38 in favor of this bill. The Senate voted 23 to 17. So this is going to be passed through, which, DeSantis is really just trying to defend the freedom of speech that, once again, Twitter, Facebook, all these organizations, especially these platforms more than anything, they have gotten government subsidies from the taxpayers. The taxpayers have been paying to protect them legally from liabilities. And then the answer from Twitter is they deplatform and they take you off the platform. So really, we're talking about almost like a government subsidized organization taking First Amendment rights away from the people. But once again, the libertarians are going to go crazy over this one. It's very weird. I always see the libertarians attacking. They always attack like the conservatives all the time, and it seems like they never have anything to say about the liberals and the left wing, ever. They're very just inconsistent on that. So Joe Biden, he takes student loan forgiveness out of the budget. This is a Breitbart piece. This one's surprising. So Joe Biden, out of this budget, after looking to pass through to fund the government for the next year or so, he took the student loan forgiveness program out of the budget. I guess he knows that that one's dead on arrival, that they're not going to pass it through with that kind of pork in the budget. And now that's a huge campaign promise that he's not fulfilling now at this point. It's not going to make him look good, but it doesn't matter because, you know, the ilk in the Democrat Party and the legacy media aren't, once again, they're not going to cover any of this stuff. So China's climate change initiatives. This is a town hall piece. It's pretty much just saying China has not actually turned down their climate or their carbon emissions at all. They're actually set to peak their climate emissions in 2030. So all these things that the United States are doing to try to be more clean in their energy sources, we should be talking to China as well as India about this, but we're not. We're going to continue to sit here and criticize Bitcoin. We're going to criticize the American economy. We're going to really stifle our own economy for carbon emissions. Meanwhile, the United States is only like a 9% contributor to carbon emissions around the world, where the biggest ones are India and China, the biggest offenders, and they will continue to do nothing. So we're going to destroy our economy and try to set up this whole U.S., you know, this Paris Climate Accord agreement, this bureaucratic organization to tell everybody else, other countries, how to run their country. And then China and India aren't going to listen to it anyway. And we're going to go and we're going to cut our legs from under us and kill our economy just to capitulate to the left wing. So that'll conclude this one, folks. I greatly appreciate everyone tuning in as always. Please, you know, go check out Federalist Papers. Give it a like, share, subscribe. Give it a rumble on Rumble. Hit that little that fist or that boxing glove. So I greatly appreciate everyone for tuning in. I will see you on Friday. Thank you.